All right, here's our third video in this introduction to Godot, and today we're going to be talking about 2D animation. So far what we've worked with bodies, collision shapes, and meshes, where meshes are just kind of basic static images. We're going to replace that with some actually interesting looking 2D animations today. And then of course in the last video we also went over areas and timers. So the first 2D animation node to know about is the sprite 2D. And this is basically just a node that is a placeholder for an image texture. So the image texture is a resource. So just like we saw with the collision shape, you have to add a shape resource. For this node, we need to add a texture resource. And the texture resource is basically an image, but that can really be one image or multiple images. And typically for 2D animations, what you will see is a sprite sheet, which is a grid of different animations. So you might lay out each animation on its own line, and then you have one line per animation. And within each element of the grid, it's got a different frame to be played for that animation. And so then we'll see in Godot that there is an animation property which defines how many grid entries there are, and we'll take a look at that in Godot in just a minute. But this isn't quite enough just to get the animation. The other thing that Godot provides is another node called the animation player node. And at first glance, it might just sound like, okay, well, this might just play the animations that we set up in a sprite 2D or a sprite animated sprite 2D, which is another node we'll talk about in a minute. But what this actually does is it can change the property of a node over time. So it's very generic, which means we can actually point the animation player to any property of any node that can be referenced, which means it's actually quite powerful. So before we actually get started with the node 2D, let's take a look at what you can do with the animation player node with just what we have in our player right now. So we're going to do a first example where we just add an animation node to the player and we just change the mesh color as we move over time. Okay, so let's jump into our game and actually use an animation player node in our player. So first we're going to add a child node and we add in animation player. And then what this does is it changes us to the animation tab down here, and we make sure that animation player is selected and then say new animation, and we'll say idle. Okay, now from here we get an add track feature, and this is how long it takes for the track to play. So you can change, this is in seconds, so if you only want it to be 1 second, and we'll do that. This is just how long we want this animation to take to play. Now if we add a property track, it'll ask which node has the property that we want to animate. And for any animation, you can refer to any one or more properties of any one or more nodes. So we can go mesh instance 2D, and then this is going to ask which property we want to change. So we're going to change the modulate. And right now for idle, we're just going to want this same color. So what we're going to do is at the end, we're going to say insert key. Now insert key, what that does, a key is a point in the animation. So it's a key frame. And in our idle animation, we want it to be our kind of standard green. And what we want is from wherever we're starting at, so from whatever the current value is, we're going to want to move it towards green. So how we get the first value to be wherever it currently is over here, there's continuous, discrete, and capture. So capture is to say wherever this currently is, that's the value that I want to start with. So we're going to say capture. Then we're going to do another animation for run. And we're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to go property track, mesh, modulate. And then at the end, we're going to add another key value. And for this one, we're just going to make it a little bit brighter. So it'll kind of like get brighter as we run. And then, so it'll go bright. Now, if we just change between these, it's not going to show it because it doesn't have a current value. It's just going to immediately jump to there. Oh, and we also have to say capture. So, all right, let's see. Maybe it'll work. No. So it doesn't have anything to capture from because the game isn't actually running. But if we jump into our code, now where we want this to change is when we go from either moving to not moving or not moving to moving, which is right down here in direction. So if we're pressing a direction, we want to say animation. Well, first what we need to do is get a reference to it. So we'll just drag that right down here. And we'll say .play, which is the function to play an animation. And then you give the name of the animation as we named it down below. So this is going to be run. And then if there's no direction, meaning the player's not pushing a move button, then we're going to say animation player .play. And then you can see we've got our options. We're going to say idle. Okay, so now if we play our game, at the start, it's dark, and then as we move, it lights up, and as we slow down, it goes towards the dark green. So that's kind of neat. But what we really want is real animations. We don't just want to use this modulate. So I'm going to take that back out. And what we're going to do is I'm going to So what we're going to do is I'm going to have you go to itch.io. And here at itch.io, you can search for assets, and you can search for paid assets or free assets. You can kind of find all sorts of different things for game developers. So we're going to go to Assets, 2D, Pixel Art, and make sure you're pressing the adds, and then Sprites, and then maybe Platformer. So this is just kind of searching on what is out there, and we're looking for a good character, and this is actually a really good one to start with, is this Sunnyland by Ansimos. If you hit download, it'll say, no thanks, just take me to the downloads, or there's a suggested donation for this. This creator has done a lot for the indie game dev community. I recommend passing a few bucks their way. Which I have done in the past. So you can do that, or you can just say, no thanks, take me to the downloads, and you can download any of these packs. So I'm going to grab this Sunnyland collection files.zip. Okay, so now in Sunnyland collection files.zip, we're going to go into assets and characters and players. Now we've got that fox character and a few other characters. The fox has kind of the most. And then if we take a look at the sprite sheet, this is what I was saying before. This is what a sprite sheet often looks like. You can see there's a big grid, and there's different animations in each row. And within each row, each column represents one frame of that animation. So like the very top one, this is like idle. This would be like running. This would be crouching. This is probably like a death. This would be jumping and then falling. This looks like another climbing animation. This looks like climbing up a ladder with your back. There's like a roll. So we can use this to do some of our animations. So what we're going to do So this is our directory for the game. I'm going to go new folder and just say resources. And then in there, I'm going to say new folder ox character. And then from over here, I'm actually just going to load in the sprite sheet. Okay, so now we're going to take out this mesh instance 2D Oops. Okay. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a sprite 2D. I'm going to move this up. Oops. Okay, now we need to go into our resources and add in the sprite sheet here, and you can see that it actually adds the entire sheet, and we need to tell Godot, oh, actually this is a sprite sheet, so we need to say that it's an animation, so it has 6 columns and it has 12 rows. Okay, so now we can see our little fox guy, and I'm going to make this a little smaller. I'm going to move our sprite up just a little bit. Maybe make this just a little smaller. Whoops. Okay. Just a little smaller on the feet. Okay, so yeah, right about there. Right there. Okay, that should be pretty good. Okay, so now what we want to do in our animation player, we want to say idle. And it starts out, it'll be kind of big. You can hold control and mouse wheel in to zoom in. So with 30 frames per second, we want a frame about every 0.133 seconds. And for this one, there's 4 frames. So we're going to add a property track, go into our sprite 2D, and we're going to say frame. Now, the way this works is because we've got a grid, this works kind of like a multidimensional array in C. So our first frame is going to be for idle, which is the top row. So we're going to say that is 0. Then at our next frame, we're going to insert a key. We're going to say that's 1. Then at our next frame, we'll insert that and say that that's, whoops, 2. Then at our next keyframe, that'll be 3. And then at our next keyframe, that's where we want the animation to stop. So that's like 0.5332, so we'll say 0.5332, and that's the length of our animation. Now if we play this, oh, and we also want it to repeat, now we've just got our idle animation. So let's do that one more time, and we'll do a run animation. So we're going to go property track, sprite 2D, frame. And this time we're going to need to find it. I think it's on row 1, but so let's say 6. Key. 7. 8. 9. 10. 11. Then we'll have that stop at 0.8. Now we've got our run animation. Okay, so now let's go in here, and what we want to do is when we let's actually create a new state machine. So we're going to go enum states, and we'll do idling running var state states, and then we'll do func ready state equals states.idling. And what I'm going to do is say func process, and take out delta. I'm actually going to move all this stuff right into process. Now we'll handle this, let's see. Oh, I guess we do need delta. And we won't need delta down there. Okay, so um, so all we'll do is we'll say state equals states dot running, else state equals states dot idling. Then down here, if state equals states dot idling, then we'll say we need a reference to our animation player. What I'm going to do is say var animation player, and I'm going to go at export. Now what this will do is when we go back into our inspector, because of the error, it's not updating things. Okay, so now if we go back to our inspector, you can see that there's actually an animation player property for our player script. And all we need to do is take this animation player and drag it right over there. So now we have a reference to a node in our tree in our script. And this way we don't have to keep dragging it in from down here, and if we change the name or something it might break. So all we have to do is say animation player.play and say idle, else, I say elif state equals states dot running animation player dot play run. Okay, now when we run our game, he's really small. Let's make him bigger. So we'll say sprite 2D, hold down shift and alt, and we'll make it bigger. Collision shape, I'm just going to move it down just to make it easier to see. Okay. Actually going to center that a little more. Oops. Okay. Now if we play our game, now we can see that he idles, and then when we move, it plays the running animation. Now, for what's happening is he's staying looking to the right even when we're looking backward. So the sprite 2D has an offset, and we have a flip, like flip H. Oh, and actually, I think maybe that's where we need to do the offset, actually. But if we see, there's a flip H, which is flip horizontally. So let's go back into our script, and first we will get a reference to our sprite 2D player. Now we can get sprite 2D. Now, down here in direction, we can say if direction greater than 0, we can say sprite dot flip H equals false, else sprite flip H equals true. Now, if we go forward, now he'll flip around horizontally. Now we haven't added a jump animation yet, so he'll just sort of idle in the air. So we can add that one as well. So we've seen how to use a sprite 2D node to do this animation, but we've also seen that it's a little bit clunky when we have a whole sprite sheet with multiple rows and columns. So there's a different node that actually makes this a little bit easier. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to delete the sprite for now. And we're just going to comment this out. Oops. There. You just hit Control/ and it'll comment. And now what we're going to do, let's look at this. We'll go add child node and we'll do animated sprite 2D. Now in this, we have to add a sprite frames. And this appears down here at the bottom. And what we want to do is we want to set our animations. So this is a similar process, but it's a little bit different. So we're going to go idle, and then we'll do run, and then we'll also add jump. Oops. So for idle, we will get our sprite sheet. We'll open it. We'll say there are 6 and 12. And then all we have to do is just select the 4 frames. And then for jump, we can do the same kind of thing. So all we're actually going to do for this one is just add the one like jump. So there's just going to be one, and so we're actually going to want to add a fall as well. So jump is there, fall, whoops, add there. And then run, we can do the same process, and we'll just grab the 6 for the run. Okay, and then let's see, so then in our animation player, we can go to idle, and we have to kind of redo all of this. We'll say animated sprite, and what we'll do is we'll say animation, and then insert key, and at the beginning of this, what this value is going to be is we are in idle, so we're going to choose idle. And then we have to add another property track, animated sprite 2D. And we're going to do frame. So we're going to say 0. Then let's see, I'll do 1. Insert 1. Insert key 2. Insert key 3. Now we've got that same idle animation. I'm going to do offset, let's say -3, get him maybe -4. There. Okay. And then we're going to do our run, and so we'll add property track, this one, and we'll do animation. And this will be insert key, and it'll be run. Add another track, property track, and it will be frame. Insert key 0. Insert key 1. Insert key 2. Insert key 3. Whoops. Insert key 4. Insert key 5. See how that looks. And so this artifacting, the way we take care of this is we actually go in here and we go for snap 2D transforms to pixel, and we just turn that on. And then when we actually run the game, that won't appear. Okay, so we need to add our jump animation, and we'll do property track. Okay, animation, insert jump. Oops, insert key. Why isn't that? Oh, there we go. I was kind of zoomed over a little bit. Okay, so jump, and then property frame, and it'll just be 0, and we can make this just 0.1, and again loop, and so it'll just be that one frame. Then we're going to add one more new, we'll do fall. Okay, animated sprite 2D, animation, insert key, fall. We will do our frame, insert key, 0. And loop that again, and again it's going to be 0.1. And then, now, back in our script, we're not going to have a reference to the sprite 2D anymore. Instead, it's going to be export var animated sprite 2D. And that's sprite 2D. Save, come in here, put that there. So then, this, instead of sprite 2D, we can see, let's see, we again have flip H. So instead of this, we're going to do animated sprite 2D. Animated sprite 2D. Okay. Let's see. From here, if we're going to say if not is on floor, we already have this. If velocity greater than 0, or velocity dot y, I think that means going down. So that would mean state equals states dot falling. Oh, we need to add jumping and falling dot falling else state equals states dot jumping. Okay, so states dot jumping animation player dot play jump state equals states dot falling animation player play fall. Okay, now the one last thing we have to do is we have to transition from falling to idle. So we can do that down here. And if we are in the falling state, if is on floor, state equals states dot idling. So that will force a transition into the idle state, which will then rapidly transition to moving. So now, whoop. Okay, so that's not quite working yet, but at least our running and jumping animations are. Oh, you know why? It's because of this. So what we want to do, rather than say this, we can just say if is on floor, else if is on floor, and then we've got kind of a repeat check, but that's okay. There, now we've got our jump. Okay, so that's how we can use the animated sprite 2D. As an exercise on your own, try and do the same thing for the enemy character. Just pick a sprite sheet or some sort of sprite that you would want for the enemy, and use an animation player to animate that sprite for the enemy character. And I will show how I do that in the next one. So thanks, and I'll see you in the next one.